Please join me in the responsive reading found in your menu of service. Love cannot remain by itself.
Love must be put into relationship.
However we find ourselves,
Female or male, rich or poor, able or disabled,
a lifelong sharing of love with others
is surely how it shall be known.
Good morning, fellow Fountain Streeters and visitors. Happy Valentine's Day. Welcome to Fountain Street, which, despite what you might have heard, is in fact a church. Yes, it's a beautiful church, but that's just frosting. Because what makes it a wonderful, inspiring place to belong is its spirit. I don't just mean its open door policy or its open mind policy. Those are great starters. But the spirit of the people is what wraps you in a warm blanket of welcome. And our menu of resources is rich and varied enough to feed any spiritual appetite. What I want to share with you today is just a bit about my spiritual journey has been supported and accelerated by Fountain Street. You see, here they don't just talk about freeing the mind, growing the soul, changing the world. They provide a whole range of tools to help us realize those goals. And who is they? It's the clergy, of course, and the staff, but also the boards and committees that keep things moving. Equally important, they include people like us, like Jean Bailey, Joel Penny, Carrie Kidder, Dana Christian Lee, Nessa McCasey, Jim Wintertroutwine, and many, many more, who have had an idea to further the cause, then took the burden of attracting like-minded people, and then worked out the logistics necessary to turn their ideas into a vital living endeavor. Here we have ways to grow the soul from incredibly diverse starting points. We have activities to strengthen the body, regardless of age, starting from within or from the outside. We provide many opportunities to serve fellow members of the human race, and many opportunities to express creativity, even if you think you don't have any. I participate in 2 poetry groups, one for reading, one for writing, and both for thinking more deeply and clearly. Recently, I started participating in Jean Bailey's Sunday morning book discussion group. Their current book is Thank God for Evolution by Michael Dowd. Now, this evangelical preacher, come scientist, come prophet, has come up with a way to view God and the universe and life that is all-inclusive. It shows the way to accommodating not just all Christian denominations, but all religions. A perfect melding of religion and science. I highly recommend it. That's, I think, the 6th group that I've been involved with at Fountain Street, the church. When disparate teachings dovetail and start pointing in a single direction, you have to believe that you're on the right track. This is where good things happen. This place, this church, is where you belong.
Oh, Valentine's Day. Did everyone remember who was supposed to remember? Did you have a good excuse if you did not? I gave my wife a card. It wasn't a Valentine's card per se, but it had perfect sentiment on it. It was something from Oscar Wilde. It said, why do we say women can't why is it we think women can't take a joke? She married you, didn't she? Yes. And it's hard to avoid the romantic parts. I'm not going to talk about romantic love, but in my heart today I'm thinking of all those great sonnets of William Shakespeare, most of which were written to a young man. He was older, but they are often not gender referenced, so they can apply to any couple. One that I love so much: who shall believe my verse in time to come if it were filled with your most high deserts? Though yet heaven knows it is but as a tomb that hides your life and shows not half your parts. If I could write the beauty of your eyes, and with fresh numbers number all your graces, the age to come would say, this poet lies. Such heavenly touches ne'er touched earthly faces. So shall these pages, yellowed with their age, be scorned like old men of less truth than tongue, and your true rights be termed a poet's rage in the stretched meter of an ancient song. But were a child of yours alive that time, you would live twice, in it and in my rhyme. Go memorize a poem today. It'll give you great consolation in years to come. In the Revised Common Lectionary shared amongst many Christian denominations, a portion of Luke is being read. It's the part that involves Jesus being tempted in the desert by Satan after he was baptized. Here's a short portion of that. Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit, returned from the Jordan and was led by the Spirit into the wilderness, where for 40 days he was tempted by the devil. He ate nothing at all during those days, and when they were over, he was famished. The devil said to him, If you are the Son of God, command this stone to become a loaf of bread. Jesus answered him, It is written, one does not live by bread alone. Ambrose Bierce in the 19th century was a famous wag, cynic, humorist, wrote the unabridged Devil's Dictionary, in which he defines love in this way. Love, noun, a temporary insanity curable by marriage. It is, in fact, as I pointed out, not only the birthday of Frederick Douglass, but of the founding of Morehouse College, which was established as Atlanta Seminary for African Americans 2 years after the Civil War. It took on the name Morehouse College in 1913. And one of its greatest presidents in the 20th century was a man named Benjamin Mays, who famously said at that school, a school where he served and was president during the time that Martin Luther King was himself a student, as well as Howard Thurman. I should point out the school is also the alma mater for Spike Lee, Samuel L. Jackson, and Herman Cain. It is a Catholic institution in the smallest C sense of the word. Benjamin Mays famously said, and you can see it written in a number of places because it is a great sense, it must be borne in mind that the tragedy of life does not lie in the tragedy of life does not lie in not reaching your goal. The tragedy of life lies in having no goal to reach. It isn't a calamity to die with dreams unfulfilled, but it is a calamity not to dream. Every man and woman is born into the world to do something unique and something distinctive. If he or she does not do it, it will never be done. It isn't a disgrace not to reach the stars, but it is a disgrace to have no stars to reach for. I quote these words and those of Frederick Douglass so that we remember that Black lives matter. Alrighty, last week I told a story, just a story. And in reflection I asked myself, was it a sermon? And I decided it probably wasn't. On the other hand, nothing I ever wrote was more honest or more true. which is what sermons should be, but at the end I knew it was not exactly a sermon. And I did feel bad, because people come for the bread of a sermon, not the hard stone of unexplained truth. That's always the challenge for us preachers, as coined by the famous journalist Peter Finley Dunn and often repeated by them. The preacher is likewise obliged to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable. To the afflicted we must give the bread of hope. To the comfortable, the stone of truth. And in the case of the preacher, we are delivering the same to everyone because they are often one and the same. For all of us are afflicted in some sense, and all of us are comfortable in others. One of the afflictions in spiritual terms is this practice of Lent, which is distant from both the Baptist and the liberal tradition. I'm sure some of you are thinking, why are we doing this bizarre thing? There was Don sitting down there with all sorts of smudges on his forehead. That's not what we do. But we are not perfect in our disdain, or we would not love Advent as much as we do. Let's be honest, and this is the stone of truth part, and admit that we like religion when it's cheerful and merry, but we dislike it when it's sad and pensive and has critical things to say. Advent is happy. Merry Christmas. Lent is not. Calvary, dead person. But as the Lebanese poet Khalil Gibran observed, your joy is your sorrow unmasked. The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. Is not the cup that holds your wine the same cup that was burned in the potter's oven? We need both the pensive and the merry, as John Milton observed with his beautiful poems, Il Penseroso and L'Allegro, two temperaments that are complementary. If we love Advent, we must learn to love Lent. For if we delight in Christmas, we must find a companion in Easter. There are no banners this season, no carols to sing. We do not decorate the place. And yet, Lent deserves our attention. And this year, it deserves the attention we give to the notion of love. But wait a minute, how can love be pensive and contemplative and downright penitential? Because we got it all wrong. Because it is in fact more complicated than St. Valentine's Day. Do you know his story? First of all, there are more than one St. Valentine's. It apparently was a name very common in the late Roman Empire. It means strong and virile. And there was more than one Christian with that name who went to his death as a martyr. There are at least 3 Valentines listed among the early saints. We don't know exactly which one is meant. It could be that all 3 have been blended together. The idea that it's being a feast of romantic love actually didn't turn up until Geoffrey Chaucer mentioned it as the time when birds pair up and become mates. It didn't become a holiday, or shall we say a season for human romantic love until the 18th century. But there is a fascinating coincidence that February is the time in the ancient Roman calendar when young men and young women would pair off. So maybe that's the reason we put the 2 of them together. But I don't think Valentine actually wrote love letters to anyone. He did write letters, apparently chiding people for not being good Christians, but I don't think you'd want one on Valentine's Day. So like Valentine, I'm saying there are actually several versions of love. And I'll be considering a few in the coming weeks. I want to emphasize I will not be here next week as I'm away on a conference. You will want to be here, though, because Kent Dobson, who is the former minister at Mars Hill Chapel and the successor to Rob Bell, will be visiting us and telling us more about his next steps in his journey. And I'm sure he will be way more exciting than I will ever be. So be here. Make sure that you are representing the church well in my absence. Following that, I'll be back, and I'll be talking about love in a lot of ways. But what they all have in common is they're not quite love. Like the parable of the elephant that I read 2 weeks ago, we frequently grasp an aspect of something and think we have the whole, and the same is true for love. And the first step that I'm going to give us this morning is to destroy the notion, despite all the songs we love, that love is all we need. All we need is love. Wah, 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 wah. No, yeah, it's wrong. It's a lovely thought. And it is a lovely notion. And isn't the word lovely full of love by itself? And given the amount of hostility and hatred in the world, a strong dose of love would seem to be the medicine for what ails us all. But let's take a cold, hard look at the facts, because love is not all we need. It will not feed us. If it did, loving families would not be poor. If we do not live by bread alone, we do not live by love alone. You may know that quote. People like it. They attribute it to several people, including the great Catholic theologian Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. Isn't that charming? It's lovely. And it's wrong. Because it reinforces that notion that tends to be pervasive, at least in Western theology and philosophy, that we have souls that live inside us like drivers of machines, the deus ex machina, and the spiritual is somehow separate from the physical and more important, obviously, than the physical. And therefore, the spiritual is superior and the physical is dross. It's very tempting. But down this path lie 100 justifications for hunger and poverty, for oppression, as well as excuses for great wealth and power and injustice. For if the spiritual is more important, then what does it matter if you don't have enough to eat, as long as your spirit is well? What does it matter if you are oppressed? That's only a matter of the body. It does not crush your soul. If you are poor and I am rich, doesn't matter. In heaven we'll all be equal. In the Christian scriptures, the letter of James, the brother of Jesus, understands the danger of this, which is why we don't read him very much, because it actually tells us that we have to do things, not just believe things. What good is it, he says, my brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith but have not works? Can faith save you? Martin Luther would say yes. The brother of Jesus says no. If a brother or a sister is naked and lacks daily food, and one of you says to them, "Go in peace, keep warm and eat your fill," and yet you do not supply their needs, what good is that? We all know he speaks the truth. Our physical reality is a spiritual matter, because suffering and injustice are afflictions that we feel in our spirits, not just in our bodies. My colleague Elizabeth Barnum quoted Ta-Nehisi Coates last week in his powerful new book. This quotation she handed to me so I could use it today. "What I told you is what your grandparents tried to tell me," writes Coates. "That this is your country, that this is your world, that this is your body, and you must find some way to live within the all of it." Physical struggles are soul-crushing. Mohandas Gandhi said it very starkly. To a hungry man, a piece of bread is the face of God. To someone in pain, drugs are a god. Whether it be poverty or prison, gender or sexuality, race or religion, for unnumbered millions, physical suffering is a tourniquet that stifles the spirit. Love as a feeling, an emotion, a spiritual thing is not enough. And we know this. So the question is, then why do we say it? And why do we even mean it when we know it isn't true? And it took me a while to figure this out, but I think I have a piece of that. Because love, the feeling, is not the point. Love is the pointer. Ubi caritas et amor est Deus ibi est. That's the original phrase. It's Latin, as you figured out. This text is so old that no one knows who wrote it. It's been a part of Lenten services, especially Maundy Thursday, for many years, centuries, in fact. And yes, it connects God to love. Where there is charity and love, God is. Ubi caritas, charity, et amor est, and love is, Deus ibi est. God is. God there is. Now, there are two words there, not just amor. We all know about amor. There's the caritas part we like, and I translated it as charity, which is a good translation, but not a complete one, because caritas is bigger than charity, which we think of as I'll give something to someone who needs it. I'm being charitable, kindly. It actually goes deep into a word that if you're Italian, you know it. When you say caro mio, caro means dear, precious, worthy of our esteem. To be extending charity is to extend value, something of some preciousness that you see in that object. Love is always about something we think has value, isn't it? We don't love things that are worthless. We love things that are precious, even priceless. And therein lies the complexity of love, because sometimes we mistake the feeling we have for something as the thing that matters. I love my wife, therefore I love. No, it is the person that matters, not the feeling. It is the thing we desire, the thing of great value. And we end up looking at the feeling and not at what gave rise to it. And in doing so, we risk loving something for the feeling it gives us rather than for the value it actually has. For example, there are people who love money. Scripture says it is the root of all kinds of evil. But it isn't the money they love, it's the sense that they will be enhanced by that love, by the money they obtain. Whenever we love something, for our sake, not for its sake, we commit the sin of idolatry. Sin at Fountain Street Church? Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. There are some things that are wrong, and idolatry is one of them. Idolatry is worshiping something as greater of something as God that is not God, something that you think has greater value than you and actually has less value than you. The word worship, for example, you may recall, includes the word worth inside of it. Worth shape is what it means. So when we love something, when we worship something, we are giving it value. And so when we give value to money, we're giving to an inanimate object our very life. When we love power, we give to an inanimate abstraction our lives. When we worship, we actually turn our lives over to that other thing. We give it value, importance that sometimes is far more than it truly is. The sin of idolatry is not that God is offended that we turned to the wrong direction or said the wrong words. God is not at all interested, if any God exists, in whether or not we get the prayers right. Idolatry is when you enslave yourself to something that is unworthy of your love. That is idolatry. Now, that sounds rather abstract, and it's important that I get the abstraction parts out because that's my job. So I have to put some flesh and bones on this, and the only flesh I have to share is my own because that's the only one I have a right to display in front of God and everybody. Okay. Other teenagers of my era loved the Beatles, and they are wonderful. I loved Beethoven. I was a dork. Other teens dreamed of being rock stars. I dreamed of writing symphonies. I was a really big dork. I bought sheet music. I studied music theory on my own. I collected records. I have most of them even now. And I wrote reams of music, all of it just about as terrible as it can get. That was my first love. And I still have many of its souvenirs in my home. And you could say it was an unrequited love because music didn't love me as much as I loved it. Despite years of study and labor, the muse, inspiration, did not come to me. Because I loved the idea of being a composer, not the act of composing. Get the difference? I was trying to make myself into something. I was projecting myself onto this. I was not loving something for itself. I was loving it for myself. I worship the idea of accomplishment, success, fame, which came from a deeper, darker sense of ultimate failure and rejection. Now, I say this not to display myself, but because I have a sense that others have walked this kind of path before. That maybe some of us have had dreams or hopes or longings that were ultimately not about reaching the stars, but of getting even or making up for sadnesses in your life. In other words, that we become attached to objects of love to serve us, not the other. That's why money is so attractive. It's right there. I get a lot of it and I'll have power. I'll have fortune. I'll have approval. But who does not remember, all of us when we were young, 13, 14, 15, having a terrible crush on someone, and all we wanted was them to love us back the same way. We needed something. We didn't give it freely, we gave it with a price that couldn't be paid. I look out at our current presidential campaign, and I'm absolutely convinced that one of our presidential contenders is more in love with the idea of being president than actually serving the nation. That's a good measure. You might look at them and say, which one sees this as the cap of their own ego program, and which ones actually want to be of service? That could help you a lot. When we think of that one thing we've all wanted somewhere in our past, money, fame, love itself. When we think that one thing can make us whole, make us better, give us what's lacking in life, that's the idolatry of love. When we put everything that matters into something out there that we crave. And so we love it because when we have it, we will be fine. We will be perfect. We will be the person we should have been. I thank God I'm not young anymore. It is no mark of cynicism to admit that we need more than love, that there is no one thing, even the fabled pearl of great price, that contains everything of value. No person, no dream, no president, no religion can be all we need. And if that spoils your Valentine's Day or ruins all your rom-coms, or threatens your religion, I'm sorry. But that's the truth. And I know that's the truth because I have seen real love, and I'm going to tell you about it right now. About 20 years ago, my father was dealing with his third round of cancer, and it had taken a toll on both he and my mother, as you could expect. They were quarreling more, and they kept it no secret from the neighbor that my mother hired to help her keep house. So when I came up to visit where they lived in Vermont, she took me aside and said in a whisper, "I'm worried about them. I'm not sure they're going to stay married." And of course, now I was worried. And so as I drove them down to the hospital for Dad's next medical gauntlet, to a hospital where he had been so often that his chart was literally wheeled in on a cart because it was too large to be carried, they were sullen and silent during the whole drive. I was worried. I pulled up in front of the hospital so they could get out, and then I could park the car. And I saw them walk slowly toward the door. Dad was not at his best, of course. And just before going in, she slipped her hand into his. And I saw him squeeze hers in a way that I remember from when I was a child. And I wasn't worried. That was love. One hand in one hand. One not needing the other to complete the other, but just to be together on their way through life. In John's version of the gospel, Jesus gives us a new commandment, that you love one another. Commandment to love? How can we do that? What he means, I believe, is to see in the other not something you need, not something that will complete you, not something that you want, but see in the other something worthy of your worship, something dear, something precious, something worthy of love. Because there it is. Love is not all you need to live. It is what you are alive to give. Love is not what you need to live. It is why you're alive that you can give it. Or as my great-great-grand predecessor here, John Herman Randall, put it, by this you shall know a man, he meant everyone. How did you love? May these words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be found true in thy sight, thou who art my rock and my Redeemer.
There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. Hope. There is more hope somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more hope somewhere. There is more peace. There is more peace somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more peace somewhere. There is more joy. There is more joy somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more joy somewhere. There is more love. There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There